I didn't start any revolutions. I didn't slam doors, didn't pack suitcases, didn't stage late-night talks full of shouting, sobbing, and "you don't hear me" number. I rebelled the way women do who have neither the time nor the right for drama. Silently. In small ways. Unnoticed. In 1984, I bought myself a diary at Barnes & Noble hardcover, black like a confession. I wrote in it at night, sitting in the bathroom so as not to wake Frank. Sometimes by hand, sometimes typing on an old typewriter. I didn't write about the kids. Not about recipes. But about myself? I called this diary Stories of a Convenient Wife. It was almost funny. Then came a magazine, a small feminist zine called Voices Unspoken, published in Seattle. I found the ad at the back of Miss Magazine, looking for stories of women whose lives have been lost in the shadows. I wrote an essay, under a pseudonym. E.B. Summers, my initials, and the summer I once thought was my season of freedom. The article was called I Am Here But Not Seen. It began, if I died today, my husband would say I was a good wife, and he wouldn't lie, but he wouldn't tell the truth either. They published it. I was sent $50 by check. I cashed it at a Bank of America ATM, opening a separate account for it. No one knew. More letters came. More stories. They appeared in small online forums, journals, newsletters I subscribed to with a fake email address. I was part of something. No one knew that the kind Mrs. Brooks from the 5th house on Elm Street was one of the voices of America's invisible wives. It seemed funny. They stopped seeing me and I used it to my advantage. Neighbors said, "Evelyn, you're so modest. You never wanted anything extra, right? You probably don't have time for nonsense like finding yourself, huh?" I smiled. Nodded. Then late at night I wrote, "They're surprised I don't strive for more. But if you stare at a woman long enough as if she were just wallpaper, she really does become wallpaper." My children grew up, left, came back. I still made them waffles, ironed their shirts, paid for classes, but inside I was already two women. One mother, wife, homemaker. The other, a quiet voice from the dark, tapping on the keys. We haven't disappeared. We were just waiting for our turn to speak. Frank? He didn't notice. He said, "You're the most stable one I have. I'm so happy it's peaceful with you. Steve's wife is always complaining, but you're gold." I laughed. Quietly. By myself. I became invisible so successfully that everyone started believing I never existed. But I did. In every line, every article, every dollar in my secret account. It wasn't a bright freedom. It was the underground of a woman's soul. And I lived in it. Freer than ever before. Before leaving, I went up to the attic. I was looking for an old travel bag, the very one we took when we moved from Oklahoma to Tulsa. Ellie was little then, with 2 braided pigtails and something like courage in her eyes. And me? I only had fear and one decision: we would survive. I rummaged through dusty boxes, sifting through fragments of the past. Tickets from school morning performances. Camp photos. And a white, slightly yellowed envelope without a stamp or address. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Mine. Neat lines. Slightly shaky, dated 2008. I remembered that day. Ellie was 8. I had written the letter after she and her father signed the divorce papers in Washita County Court. Back then, I thought I had to explain something to her. Too much had happened. Too little had been said. I sat on an old box and unfolded the sheet. "Ellie, if you are reading this, it means I finally decided to give it to you. I want you to know I'm not a perfect mom. I got angry, tired, lost control. I missed your play because of a night shift. I forgot Valentine's Day in 3rd grade. I wasn't there when you cried over classmates. But I held on. I didn't always know what I was doing, but I fought for us. Sometimes just to pay the electric bill. Sometimes to make sure you had food, clothes, and something like a childhood. Forgive me for being strong when maybe what you needed was a warm, weak mom. I'm not asking for approval, just forgiveness. You are my pride. Even when I didn't say it. Even when I was busy surviving. I love you, most of all. Mom. I sat silently. Didn't cry. Just stared out the attic window as the morning fog slowly faded. The house was eerily quiet. Not even the fridge downstairs hummed. As if the whole house knew this was an important moment. I held a letter written 17 years ago and suddenly realized I'm still waiting for a moment. A convenient time. That later, when I'll tell Ellie I'm proud of her. That I love her. That I'm not waiting for invitations, I just want to be close, without extra words, without formalities. But later doesn't exist. Only now exists. And this now tells me go. No drama. No loud speeches. No attempts to explain or rewrite. Just go. And tell her you're proud. Not in a letter, not in thoughts. In person. I folded the letter back into the envelope, took it with my note to give, but to remember. I wasn't a bad mother all this time. I was just trying to survive. And now it's time to live to be where I'm needed, not because I was invited, but because I'm a mom. I started up the old Ford F-150, the same one I used to drive Ellie to school, and heard the familiar creak of the seatbelt. That pickup had character just like me. No GPS, no heated seats. Just a map, a bottle of water, and an old radio that I fiddled with until I found something that wasn't too preachy or too country. The navigator said 9 hours. Jackson, Mississippi to Charlottesville, Virginia. 9 hours. Maybe for 9 seconds. 9 words, 9 steps toward a daughter who might not even want to see me. But I went. After 3 hours, I stopped at some roadside diner on I-20. You know, the kind where the smell of bacon, stale coffee, and wood lingers even if the stove hasn't been lit in years. I ordered scrambled eggs and toast, paid $8.50, and left a $2 tip, not because I was generous, but because I remembered well what it's like to work on your feet from 6 in the morning, smiling at strangers. Back in the truck, I turned the radio back on. The DJ was talking about traffic in Raleigh, some missing dog, and discounts at Lowe's Plank and Tumaniston 2040-27. And I drove past gas stations, Greyhound buses, motels where Ellie and I used to stop on the way to Grandma's. The road pulled thoughts and memories out of me. How much time had I wasted waiting? Waiting for my husband to come back. Waiting for Ellie to say, "Mom, I love you." Waiting for someone to finally notice how much I duel in silence. Then around the 6th hour it happened. I lightly pressed the gas, passing a semi, when suddenly blue lights behind me. A cop car! I slowed down, exhaled, and pulled over to the shoulder. "Evening, ma'am. License and registration?" I handed over my documents without arguing. I knew I'd been speeding. "Know how fast you were going?" I smiled. "Probably faster than I've been moving in the last 20 years. The officer, a man about 40 with a tired face and a badge that said Rodriguez, looked at me more closely. "Where you headed in such a hurry?" I thought for a moment, then told the truth. "To see my daughter. Big day for her, bigger for me." He nodded, checked my info, then came back and wrote me a ticket. $125. First one in 20 years. When he left, I looked at the ticket and chuckled. Guess even the law is surprised I'm in a hurry. And I drove on. Because I realized I'd been in wait, accept, be silent mode for too long. Now I'm driving. For 9 seconds. For a look. For a chance to say, I'm here. And even if I wasn't invited, I'm going because love doesn't need an invitation. I stopped at a gas station in Richmond to fill up and grab some coffee. It was already past midnight. The fluorescent lights stung my eyes, and the place smelled like gasoline, hot dogs, and something sold as coffee but tasted more like liquid ash. I was standing at the counter with a can of Red Bull and a couple of energy bars when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Di?" I turned. It was Rick. Rick Bennett, my ex. The man I hadn't seen in 10 years. Not since he walked out. Not since I was left alone with a child, an unpaid mortgage, and a pile of questions he never answered. He wore a leather jacket, jeans, and the gray in his temples was new. Still Rick Butt, now carrying the weight of years that finally seemed to catch up with him. Didn't expect to see you here. He didn't meet my eyes. Likewise, I said. My hands trembled just a little. I took my change and headed for the door. He followed. You, heading to Charlottesville too? He asked, quieter now. I stopped and turned. You know about the defense? He nodded. Yeah, heard from her cousin. Guess someone still thinks I care. Do you? I asked, and I didn't recognize my own voice. It was sharp, like a blade. Rick exhaled and leaned against the hood of his car. I didn't know if I was allowed to show up. Maybe she wouldn't want me there. Maybe I'd just ruin everything by existing. And in that, maybe was everything. All the cowardice. The too late guilt. The weight of all the things he didn't do, didn't write, didn't say, didn't show up for. We stood in silence. Cars roared by on the highway. Something gurgled loudly in the coffee machine inside. And then, suddenly, I said, "Come with me." He froze. You serious? I nodded. Why? Even I wasn't exactly sure. It wasn't about forgiveness. And it wasn't about getting back together. It was about our daughter, about a moment she deserved to experience with both her parents, even if one of them was still piecing himself back together. I opened the door to my truck. You're driving. I already got one ticket, and if I get pulled over again, it's going to be awkward. He laughed softly, tiredly, with a kind of gratitude that doesn't need words. We pulled out. Rick behind the wheel, me in the passenger seat. And in the hush of the cab, with the tires whispering against the highway, for the first time in years, I didn't feel anger. Not bitterness. Just presence. Maybe he was an unexpected passenger. But maybe this was the turn the journey needed. For her. For us. For the 9 seconds this whole thing was about. We were driving along I-85, already past Atlanta. Outside the windows, endless night and the flickering lights of the occasional roadside motel. Inside the pickup, silence. Not the comforting kind, but the kind that scratches at your nerves, like someone muted a movie just as someone behind the scenes started screaming. Rick gripped the wheel with both hands, as if that might save him from whatever was about to surface between us. I stared ahead, but I could feel his breath like I used to, in another house, another life. Back then, he smelled like cigarettes and gasoline, now vending machine, coffee, and exhaustion. You're awfully quiet, he said, eyes still on the road. What do you want to hear? I replied. That I forgive you, or that I regret asking you to come? He didn't answer right away. Just shifted gears, eased off the gas a bit. I just want to be there, Di, he said. Just once, just not be late this time. The words hung in the air like a closed sign on a door we'd taken too long to reach. Little late for punctuality, I snorted. Remember when you missed her ballet recital in 3rd grade? He gave a sheepish smile. I thought it was a football game. I even showed up with a hot dog and a pennant. A pennant? I laughed. At Swan Lake? Yup, Saturday in the back row chewing a hot dog while a bunch of kids in tutus danced on stage. Ellie didn't talk to me for a week. I told her you were on a mission, saving the world, I said. And right then, my voice wavered just for a second. He looked at me, gently, no defenses. Di, I wasn't saving anything back then, not the world, not even myself, I just ran. I didn't respond. Every time I got a picture of Ellie for Christmas, birthdays, I didn't even look. I stuffed them in a drawer. I didn't know what to do with them, because being a dad wasn't something I ever learned how to do. But you handled everything. Alone. Without me. It was the first time he'd said it out loud. I turned to the window. A sign flashed by on the shoulder. Welcome to South Carolina. And suddenly I realized I wasn't just driving with a man. I was driving with a ghost of the past I could finally see clearly. You still don't know how to be a father, Rick, I said quietly, but maybe that doesn't matter. Tonight, we can both just be present. He nodded. Thanks for letting me in the truck, even if not back into your life. I smiled sideways, a little bitter. Well, the pickup's old, got more room than my heart these days. He chuckled. And we fell silent again. But this time it was a silence with space. For air. For memory. For a road that led not just to Ellie, but to accountability even if late in arriving. And I thought, sometimes even ghosts deserve a chance. If they're willing to drive through the night, just to speak one honest word. Somewhere between Greenville and Charlotte, on a stretch of empty highway, the pickup started to jerk like it had run out not just of power, but of the will to keep going. I felt it a second before the temperature gauge began to climb. Seriously? I whispered, swerving onto the shoulder. The hood steamed like a mug of cheap coffee, and that night, the universe seemed to decide, talk already. Rick got out first, popped the hood, winced. Gasket or radiator, we're not making it. Aren't you a mechanic used to be? I muttered. Die, I've been signing paperwork, not turning wrenches for the last 5 years. We called a tow truck. The operator said, estimated wait time, 70 minutes. I repeated it aloud. 70 minutes on the shoulder, perfect. Now all we need is rain. We got back into the cab, silence. Not the kind between lines, the kind that lives inside you. I wrapped my arms around myself like I was trying to hold in not the cold, but the pulse that had started racing again. You know what I'm scared of? I asked, still staring out the windshield. He nodded like he'd been waiting. I'm not afraid she won't hug me, or that she'll say, I don't need you. I'm afraid she'll just look at me, calmly, and say, oh, hi, Mom. Like I'm no one. Like I wasn't the one driving her to swim practice at 5:30 a.m. Like I didn't give up my last paycheck for her tutoring. Like I was never really there. Rick exhaled, pressed his lips together. Then he said slowly, Die if she really didn't care. She would have posted that on Facebook for everyone. She would have sent out invites. She would have made it loud, made sure we saw it, and stayed away. I turned to him, really looked at him for the first time. He went on. But she kept it quiet. That's not apathy, that's shame. And shame is still a feeling. It means she still feels something about us. I stayed silent. A passing semi lit up his face for a second. The lines that hadn't been there before, and in his eyes, not forgiveness, but recognition. I looked out the windshield. In the reflection, me. Tired, gray at the temples. But still moving, still alive. Do you think we have a chance? I whispered. He shrugged. Ellie's got her own story. But we're in it whether we like it or not. The only question is, what role do we play? Ghosts from the past? Or people who finally found the way? And then I felt it. Hope. Small. Like a gas station light in the dark doesn't light the road, but tells you, you're not alone. And in that moment, on the side of the road, in the middle of the night, with a broken pickup and a broken past, I understood. I'm going anyway. Even if I have to walk. Even if I go alone. Even if I'm afraid. Because motherhood isn't about being invited. It's about choosing to go, even when no one is waiting. By noon the next day, the tow truck had dragged us as far as Columbia, South Carolina. Rick found a rental car and paid with his credit card. Figured I'd be useful for once, he muttered. I didn't object. At that moment, we weren't exes. We were just two people who still believed they mattered to their daughter. The drive to campus was quiet. Not because we had nothing to say, but because every word felt like too much. Inside, there was only one question humming. What if she doesn't want to see us? The humanities building looked grand, all glass, brick, and university flags. Out front students' friends, some holding flowers, others sipping cider. We're late, I said, glancing at the time. The defense had ended 20 minutes ago. Not too late, Rick answered. I clutched the paper bag in my hands. Inside was the gift. A rewritten version of that letter I'd once drafted for Ellie after the divorce. I had copied it carefully onto a blank card. No drama, no expectations. Just, you are my pride, even if you never heard it, even if I said it too late. We stepped into the building together. Not as a couple, but as parents. And then I saw her. Ellie was surrounded by friends laughing, confident, wearing thick black-rimmed glasses she never used to wear. She had on a tailored pantsuit exactly like the one I wore in an old photo from my thesis defense. As if, somewhere deep down, she had taken something good from me, even if she spent years pretending she hadn't. And at that moment, she turned. I don't know if she felt us there, or just turned because of the noise. But she saw us. Shock isn't the right word. Her face held everything. Surprise, unease, a flicker of frustration, and then something like a quiet collapse. "Mom? Dad?" she exhaled. The silence in the hallway stretched, like film over still water. People stopped talking, glanced over, stepped aside, as if instinctively sensing something important was happening. I took a step forward. My voice didn't shake. "No drama, just the truth. We came because you deserve it. No accusations. No hurt tones. No, why didn't you tell us? Just a fact. We're here because we love you. Even if it's late. Even if it's imperfect." Ellie stood silent. I held out the bag with the letter. "If you want, read it. If not, just know. I'm proud of you." She took it, didn't look inside. Just looked at both of us. And for the first time in a long time, she smiled. Softly. Uncertain. But real. I didn't expect a hug. Didn't expect tears. But in that moment, in that hallway, surrounded by strangers, next to a man I'd fallen out of love with, but never stopped respecting as the father of my child, I felt something shift back into place. A small click in the heart. Not from breaking. From healing. And I knew. Even if she says nothing, even if that was the whole scene, she saw us. Truly saw us. She held the letter in her hands. We stood there, just stood, Rick and I. And I could feel something real simmering in the silence, not tension, but expectation. As if everything depended on a single glance, a single breath. And Ellie took a step. Not a rush. Not some dramatic gesture. Just one step. Then another. And I already knew she wouldn't turn away. She wouldn't run. And then she reached us. Hesitated for a second, then hugged me. Her arms were stiff at first, like she wasn't sure where to put them. But then I felt her lean in. Not like a grown woman. Like a girl. The same girl who used to sit on my lap waiting for New Year's Eve. The one I protected from night terrors after Rick had moved to another house. The one I let go to college pretending I was fine when inside, I was falling apart. I couldn't hold it in. I cried. And, to my surprise, I heard a sniffle from the other side. From Rick. He stood a little off to the side. Awkward. Like a man who had practiced being a stranger for years. But Ellie turned to him. Silent, staring for a long moment. He almost whispered, like he was afraid of breaking something. "I didn't know if you'd let me come." She didn't answer. Just nodded. And hugged him too. I never believed in perfect moments. But this was one. The tears came for all three of us. Not because of pain, but because we had finally allowed ourselves to be here. Together. "Why are you together?" Ellie asked, pulling back a little. "I mean, together? Together? Or just, what even was this?" I laughed, not loudly, more like a sigh of relief. "It's not together like before," I said. "It's together because you're the only one we've got. And sometimes, you have to forget the past so you don't miss the present." She looked at me for a long time. And then she said something I never expected. "I didn't invite you because I thought you'd start fighting, right in the middle of my defense." Rick and I exchanged a glance, almost like allies. "In another lifetime, yeah," he said. "But I think we've both grown up." "And you?" I asked her. She nodded. "I want to grow up too, but not without you." And in that moment, I knew. We hadn't just caught up to the moment. We had started over. We were walking to a small cafe near campus. Awkward, of course. Every step echoed the years we'd spent apart. Not a single perfectly crafted word, not one effortless movement. But there wasn't a trace of pretense, everything was real. Diana adjusted her coat a little nervously. Rick stayed quiet, staring off somewhere, and Ellie walked ahead, as if unsure what to expect. It was clear we were all a little scared, but none of us wanted to give old resentments the last word. Once seated, we ordered coffee and simple food, nothing fancy like the evening itself. But in that simplicity, something real began to grow, not yet in words, but in something felt deeply. "Remember when Ellie tried to bake a birthday cake for me by herself?" I said, trying to break the ice. "You almost went up in flames with that mixer." Rick grinned and replied, "You said it was my idea. I just wanted to surprise her." We laughed, and in that laughter lived the irony of time past, of shared mistakes, and our clumsy attempts to be better. "And remember when Ellie snuck off with my favorite book and dropped it in the pool?" Rick added. "That was a masterpiece," Ellie laughed. "I just wanted to be like you." Her voice was soft and genuine, like she was allowing herself for the first time to simply be. Then she turned to me quietly, almost shyly. "Mom, what do you do now, at work?" It was the moment I'd feared and longed for at the same time. I took a breath and said, "I work in a hospital. I'm a nurse. It's hard, but I love it. I help people who really need someone to care." Ellie nodded, and in her eyes I caught a flicker of respect that had been hidden until now. Rick spoke too, with a sincerity that surprised me. "I want to be part of your lives. I know a lot of things weren't right, but I'm willing to try again for you, Ellie, and for both of you." I looked at him, and for the first time in a long time, I felt his words were coming from the heart. Just then, the waitress came by, a young woman with a warm smile. She glanced at me and, laughing, said, "You look like such a young mom. I thought you were Ellie's aunt at first." We all burst out laughing. That little bit of humor seemed to lift something heavy off our shoulders, a reminder that life goes on, and there's always room for lightness. This wasn't a perfect celebration, there were still things left unsaid between us. But today, we'd begun to talk, really talk, without masks, without pretending. And maybe, just maybe, that was the most important thing. I stood at Ellie's doorstep, watching the light fade behind her closing door. Rick had already gone his own way, our paths diverging again, but now it felt like we were both just a little closer than we'd been before. I took a deep breath, feeling something shift inside me. Evening was settling over the city as I climbed into the pickup. The road home stretched long ahead, nearly 9 hours. Once, those miles had felt empty and heavy, full of unsaid words and lingering hurt. But now there was a quiet certainty in my heart. I opened the glove compartment and took out that old draft, the letter that had sat forgotten in the attic for years. A page filled with words I never sent, soaked in pain and hesitation. I looked at them in the light of a street lamp, the same words that had once been my hope and also my wound. Then, slowly, I reached for my lighter and brought the flame to the edge of the paper. The letter hissed and crackled, curling into ash that floated gently down to the ground. "I don't need words anymore to be heard," I whispered to myself. That simple act meant more than burning an old piece of paper. It was a sign of release, of letting go. I no longer needed someone else's recognition to feel worthy. I was my own anchor now. The road back felt different. Not so lonely even though I was driving alone. The silence around me wasn't frightening anymore. It felt comforting, like an old friend who sits with you without asking for explanations. By morning, back at the hospital, I opened the door to my shift and saw familiar faces. They looked at me differently, not just as the woman who came and went, but as someone who had changed, both inside and out. One of the nurses, Jessica, smiled and said, "Diana, something's different about you." I smiled back, knowing she was right. "Yeah," I said, "I showed up with the right person this time, myself." And in that moment, I understood. The most important journey, the one that matters most, is the one that leads back to yourself. Everything else is just a chapter on the way. I was ready for the next part of my life, strong, calm, and free. No longer the woman afraid she might not make it, but the woman who knows exactly where she's going.